return of the gods. Jonathan, if the gods, these unclean demonic spirits, have indeed returned, as you lay out in the book in great detail, how would they return in the modern era? We're not necessarily seeing people worshiping golden calves, obviously, and idols of wood. How would they return? It seems much more subversive today.
They're returning to a civilization that has known God. So, that quote, a quote, Christian civilization. So it's a whole different thing. Can't come back, first of all, can't come back all at once. Can't come back saying, hey, we're going to mess you up. It's going to come back step by step by step. First by a little thing, a gentle. And the thing is, what's going to open the door is if that civilization starts turning away from God. And when you can see the real marker is the beginning of the 1960s, you start seeing the turning, putting God away, putting prayer away. That is what's going to open the door. And the thing is that when you look at, which gods are going to return, the same gods or the same principalities that were in when Israel turned away from God. God, because we're in that pattern that they're going to return. And with Israel, there were three primary gods, among others, that epitomized everything. One I call in the book, in the Return of God, is called the possessor.
And you call these, by the way, the dark Trinity.
Yes, it's a Trinity. That's right, the dark Trinity. Yeah, the first is called the possessor. The second is called the enchantress. And the third is called the destroyer.
So these are the three primary gods that have returned. Look, you mentioned rightly, Jonathan, beginning in the 1960s, a bit of a national backsliding away from God really began then. Prayer removed in the schools, the so-called sexual revolution. You dig into it in the book.
Yeah, well, first you open the door. The door is turning from God. But when you open the door, the house is never going to stay empty. That's what it's saying. And so what happens, you have the first one called the possessor. In Hebrew, his name was Baal or Baal, which means the possessor or the Lord or the master or the owner. And what he did, or this principality, is he was the alternate substitute gods. He was the God of the turn away from God. I'm going to be your new God. I'm going to make you prosperous. And he's the one, or this principality, that drove God out of the public square, out of the palace, out of the children's education. So what do you see in America? You see a spirit that starts driving God out, step by step by step. Started small. People said, okay, it's taking prayer out. Look at where it has come, because again, you empty the house. If you empty the house, something else is coming in. And so what comes in is this spirit of Baal.
Really the main pagan deity, it seems. Baal was the most prevalent in ancient times.
Yeah, later on, he's actually associated with Zeus, in the time of the Greeks and the Romans. So he was the king of the Canaanite gods. He's the first one. He's like that first spirit that comes in. And then he brings his friends. And so in the Bible, it says he caused Israel to forget God. So what's happening is there's a spirit that has caused America to forget God, to forget that it ever knew God. If you knew back then in the 60s, if people knew where it was going to end up, what the thing is this? These are pagan gods or pagan spirits. So if they come to a Christian nation, their mission is to turn a nation that is, quote, Christian and turn it into a pagan nation. Paganizing. That is what we have been watching for the last half century. When you're saying what's going on, that's what's going on. And it even says he caused Israel to turn away from the commandments. We literally have struck down the 10 commandments in America. We banned it. The spirit of Baal is in all these things. We are watching this nation and this civilization becoming pagan.
And you have written many times, Jonathan, and really many of your books about the parallels between Israel's trajectory with the Lord and America's trajectory with the Lord, our shared destinies in some ways. So I guess it's no surprise to you, obviously, that some of the same problems that plagued ancient Israel are now plaguing America.
Yeah, with the Harbinger in the other books, it's speaking about the signs that happen now. This is speaking about the actual spirits that are in there, and they're in America now. And it actually goes deep because the process of Baal taking possession of a culture is that it's deep. Because, for instance, in the pagan world, you had many gods. You didn't have one God. So you didn't have one truth. You had many truths. You could make your own, you could make your idol. I created my own reality. That is what we are watching when people says your truth, my truth. If I say I'm a tree, you have to accept that because there's no truth, because that's pagan. That is totally pagan. Yeah. And when you also take away God, everything becomes God. Sex becomes God. Nature becomes God. Ideology becomes God. This is behind wokeism. This is behind, even behind, I won't get into, we won't have time, but an ancient mystery linked to our addiction to computers. Computers are linked to this. Virtual reality, New Age, all this is linked to Baal, and the pagan is of America.
1960s, the door was really open to this, Jonathan. Did Baal, the sign of the possessor, physical sign, did it manifest itself in America?
Yeah, right near here. Right near here.
And we're in New York City, just a reminder.
Yeah, this is one of the signs of Baal actually was a bull, a bronze bull. All over Israel it was a sign, and it was linked to, they went to Baal because they said, well, you're going to help us be prosperous. You're going to help our fields. Well, what happened is in the 1980s, a sign appeared right near here. They put down, they laid it. It was a massive, massive bronze bull, the sign of Baal, and the sign in the Bible of a nation that once knew God and is now turned away from God and is now subject to Baal. And right by Wall Street, by the financial, which is about prosperity, we call it a bull market. That's a Baal market. There's actually, I won't go into it because we don't have the time, but even a part of Baal's temple was recreated and erected right near where we are in New York City and in Washington.
Bulls and Baals. Folks, you're not going to hear this anywhere else. I guarantee. The book is called The Return of the Gods, and it can be yours for a gift of just $25. You see the information there on your screen. Pick this book up for such a time as this. Hey, we're talking about the Dark Trinity.
Yes.
The possessor, Baal, number one. Yes. The second member of this dastardly trio, the Enchantress.
Yes.
Tell us about her.
Yeah. Actually, in Canaanite mythology, she is known as the wife or lover of Baal, but she appears everywhere. She appears in the Bible as she's called Astarte or actually Ashtoreth. Ashtoreth. And you see Baal and Ashtoreth, and in that order.
The
first
poles,
is Baal,
the Ashtoreth poles.
that
were worshipped.
So first is Baal, then comes Ashtoreth. And what was she? Well, she's known as Ishtar as well. She's also known as, when she went to Greece, she became Aphrodite. She became Venus, but it's a very dark thing. She was the goddess of sexual immorality. Sexuality, divorce from marriage. She was actually known as the great harlot, the prostitute goddess. And so when she comes into a culture, what's going to happen? Well, what we expect that as Baal comes in, the turning from God first, then we would expect something to happen to sexuality, a revolution. And that's exactly what happens starting in the 60s. The sexual revolution starts. This is the power. This is the principality that will seek to possess a nation by turning the Christian sexual values, values of marriage, into pagan sexual values. That's exactly what we have been witnessing ever since. So this starts taking over our culture. It's the second part, and it goes deep.
The Enchantress is a goddess of prostitution, as you describe in the book, Jonathan.
Yes.
A goddess of drunkenness, even, and many vices, but all coming back to sex, promiscuity and gender confusion and gender madness.
It's going to get to that. Yeah, it's going to get to that. Yeah. So but it starts first with taking sex out of marriage. Remember, she's the prostitute goddess. So what does the prostitute do? Takes sex out of marriage, puts it into the marketplace, puts it into the culture. So we're watching the sexualization of America and of the West. And what that means is she was detrimental to marriage. So we're watching marriage become weakened. We're watching marriages getting destroyed, broken homes, broken children, because that's what it does. But even, I'll give you a little mystery here that, and again, we can only touch on the things that are in the book, but the word for the prostitute back then in Greek is the word porne or porn. We get pornography actually comes from this goddess. The first pornography was from her. She put the images of naked women. The pornographic literature came from her. We talk about the word erotic of happening to the world. Well, that comes from the Greek word eros. Eros was a god who was born of this goddess. It all comes back.
One last member of that dark trinity, the destroyer. Before we go, about a minute before the break, Jonathan, who is the destroyer?
It goes right in progression. First turning from God, then sexual immorality. Then what happens is Israel started offering up their children as sacrifices to the gods, particularly the god Moloch. And Moloch is the destroyer. And so this is a pagan thing. This was common in the pagan world. But what it means is if we are continually following these gods, if they are coming back, if we are being paganized, we're going to end up actually offering up our own children. And like clockwork, it happens. We legalize abortion. We have killed 60 million children. And we won't have time to go into the mystery, but even when you look at I bring it out in the book that the ancient ways of offering up the children to Moloch are actually being reproduced right now without even people realizing.
I mean, it's unbelievable that people should know, Jonathan, what went on in ancient times and during Bible times. Moloch, this idol, people literally would sacrifice their children. The Bible called it passing through the fire.
Yes.
I mean, and you detail it.
It's the same way it happened with priests. I mean, we have our own form of priests. Same way, actually, more poor children, basically minorities, were killed because of this god, and it's happening the same way here. It's following like clockwork. You can say, how could they ever do that? We're doing it. We're following. This is what the gods do. This is what the pagan world does.